Hey everybody, Aaron the Nintintrovert here, and welcome back to another episode of the Pictochat podcast. Coming at you fashionably late as usual. I'm supposed to, get these out every Saturday. That's the schedule that I'm trying to keep, but it's hard. It's hard maintaining a consistent schedule. Got last minute plans and stuff that comes up. But anyway, it's here now. We're finally going to be talking about the Donkey Kong Bonanza Nintendo Direct that aired last week, where we got approximately 17 minutes worth of new footage on the game. And I got to say, it's looking pretty bananas. All right, so let's talk about it. So yeah, right off the bat, this Nintendo Direct blew the Mario Kart World one out of the water as far as game specific Nintendo Directs go. That's part of why I didn't record a live reaction because I had low expectations for this presentation. I thought that it was going to be kind of like the Mario Kart World one where we would get very little new information, if anything at all. But no, this was a pretty solid one. Honestly, I would say this was maybe one of the best pre-release showcases of a game that Nintendo's done since Breath of the Wild. Remember that January 2017 big Nintendo Switch presentation they did a couple months before the system came out, where they gave us the release date and all that, and they ended it off with a trailer for Breath of the Wild, which I would consider to this day to be probably the best trailer I've ever seen for a video game. But this Donkey Kong Bonanza presentation was not far off from that. It took me from being very skeptical about the game to feeling pretty confident that it's going to be a good game now. And we're going to get into all the reasons why here. But yeah, I'm very excited for this game, and it's coming out here in just a few weeks. So yeah, first of all, the presentation was very emotional, like the start and ending with this music being sung, I guess, by young Pauline here. And so there's this whole kind of sense of the game of just, bonds and the camaraderie between Donkey Kong and this young Pauline who's been aged down. Not really sure what's up with that, if there's a, time travel component going on here, or if it's just a case of, Nintendo just messing with the Mario canon. Probably. I mean, there's no real continuity. Nintendo just does whatever Nintendo wants to do. It's kind of funny, though, because I've been playing Fantasy Life, The Girl Who Steals Time, which is a game that just recently came out for Switch 1 and Switch 2, and having a lot of fun with it. And one of the things in that game is you do these, like, randomly generated, like, dungeons, basically, where you go down, like, each floor takes you back in, like, further back in time. I doubt there's any correlation there, but I just think that's funny. You've got this game, this Donkey Kong game, where there's something funny going on with, with the timing, with, like, why Pauline's age is different, and you're also digging down to the core of the planet, which is sort of kind of how things work in that Fantasy Life game. But in that game, as you go further down, you go further back in time, which is kind of weird and interesting. But I guess it kind of makes sense though, because when you think about it, that's where you're going to find like all the like fossils and stuff, right? And obviously you do that in this Donkey Kong game because stuff dies and decomposes, and so that adds layers and layers to the soil. So all of the old stuff is buried deep down. So I don't know. Maybe there is an element of that in the new Donkey Kong game. Maybe once they get to the planet core, there's going to be like a whole Jurassic World or something down there with like dinosaurs and stuff. Who knows? I'm kind of expecting the center to just be kind of like a lava level, Essentially, you just burrow all the way down to heck. But anyway, but yeah, the music at the start and ending there is very emotional. Really great music throughout the whole presentation, honestly. But yeah, people have obviously drawn parallels with Donkey Kong and Pauline's relationship here to like Boo and Sully from Monsters Inc., and also with Ralph and Vanellope from Wreck-It Ralph. And I think that's always been kind of a that's a fun, wholesome dynamic when you've got this big burly male character who's kind of just a big softy taking care of this little girl. You've also got stuff like as a kid I remember Maggie and the Ferocious Beast Then there was like the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant, if anybody saw that. So similar vibes to all that. It's a trope that I can definitely get behind, but it feels it feels a lot more story driven than other than most Mario games or just Nintendo games in general. To be honest, outside of like JRPGs and stuff like Fire Emblem or Xenoblade or whatever. So I think that's really cool to see. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Yoshiaki Koizumi is the leading like director of this game. And for those who don't know, Koizumi, he is kind of responsible for a lot of Nintendo's more story-driven games. Miyamoto has historically been very kind of like anti-story, although I think maybe he's changed his tune on that a little bit in recent years. Especially with working on like the Mario movie and now the Zelda movie and stuff. I think Miyamoto now is kind of more interested in expanding on the lore and the characters and in these different Nintendo properties. But used to Miyamoto was very starkly against having story in Mario games in particular. And so Yoshiaki Koizumi is one of the really one of the few people at Nintendo I feel like who's actually willing to sometimes butt heads with Miyamoto and say like, hey, no, I know you're a genius with like all these years of legacy experience behind you and made all these masterpieces. However, you're not right about this. But yeah, thanks to Koizumi's bullheadedness, we'll say, that's why we got the backstory on Rosalina in Super Mario Galaxy. He kind of like he was so passionate about wanting to give her this cool backstory as like a little girl and like her mom dying and all this stuff, this like emotional stuff you read about in Rosalina's storybook, which is every like maybe every couple of worlds or something that you beat in Mario Galaxy, a new chapter unlocks. You can go to the library in the game, and she'll be reading her Lumas a bedtime story, which is the story of her as a little girl and how she got to become what she is, and meeting the Lumas and everything. But yeah, this guy was so passionate about that he worked on this, without getting paid. Like after hours, like when he went home, he was like secretly like behind Miyamoto's back, essentially, like illustrating and coming up with this whole little story for Rosalina. And also stuff like Link's Awakening, which is definitely one of the quirkier Zelda games that really kind of broke a lot of Zelda conventions, where it's got all these like Mario enemies there for some weird reason. You've got Goombas and stuff, and Piranha Plants and Chain Chomps, and the whole thing is this dream. It's kind of got this emotional ending where it's like when Link wakes up, then like the whole world dissipates, and so it's like, well, was any of that actually real? So it's kind of a thought-provoking, somewhat existential game that you don't really see Nintendo necessarily tackle a whole lot. And Koizumi, he also went on to direct Super Mario Odyssey, and people have said that this game, looks to be very similar to Mario Odyssey in a lot of ways. Like the user interface, like the menus and stuff, almost look identical, like the same font and everything, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I would not be surprised at all if this is the same team behind Mario Odyssey. And that was one of my original sources of concern, because as much as I love Koizumi, he's probably my favorite living person at Nintendo right now. I feel like I love seeing him in the Nintendo Directs. I feel like he embodies a lot of the same childlike joy and just humor and likability that Iwata had, before he passed away. But yeah, I was not the biggest Mario Odyssey fan. But I'm feeling a lot more confident, especially after seeing this new footage of the game, that they are going to rectify some of those issues that I had with Odyssey. I was one of those people that was in the camp of like, well, there's too many moons everywhere. Because when you get power moons for just the most simple thing, like you can just kick around a rock and then da 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 da, you got a moon, and or ground pound this glowing spot, da 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 da, you got a moon. And it just it diminishes the dopamine hit. When you are giving them out like candy and like making the player not really feel like they had to work for it. It's like when SpongeBob with the extra credit, right? When he says, "Mrs. Puff, I don't feel like I really did anything." That's kind of how I feel about Mario Odyssey a little bit. And that's also why I'm kind of glad in a way that the Switch 2 doesn't have an achievement system like PlayStation. Because like I don't know, that's just a personal thing, I guess. But like I just kind of hate seeing like the little trophies you get for it's like wow you jumped 100 times. Here's a trophy. Here's a trophy for completing the tutorial. It's like I feel like so many of these trophies in games are just arbitrary little things just to give you that little dopamine hit. But it's like it hands them out so much that it's like I don't feel like I'm really working toward this. And I mean, there's something different, I guess, to be said about getting like a platinum trophy in a game. But a lot of the bronze ones that you get for just really mundane, basic stuff, and it's like it makes me feel patronized a little bit. It's like good job, good, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how Mario Odyssey makes me feel a little bit. Um, but I don't know. I'm not really getting that same sense from this game. Mario Odyssey, I was a little disappointed. I wanted a lot more, platforming challenges. Where there would be some, there'd be some areas where you go to and you'd have to kind of like leave your hat Cappy behind, so you couldn't do all the crazy flips and stuff with him. And get through it a little bit like Flood and Mario Sunshine, but nowhere near as difficult as that. So there was a little bit of that, but I don't know. I'm really excited with this game where they showed off. There's this whole these ruins that you find a little bit, I guess, like the shrines in Breath of the Wild, except maybe not as in depth, but that's okay. Because honestly, the shrines are not necessarily my favorite. That's probably one of my least favorite things about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I really like them in concept. The thing with me is that I'm not the biggest puzzle guy. But I love the idea of these little bite-sized challenges, and I think it's interesting to see how Nintendo's evolved over the years. Where, back on like with the 3DS and stuff, they had a lot of games, like say Super Mario 3D Land, right? They made instead of making it like a sandbox Mario, they're like, okay, we're gonna make it just this linear game where you just complete levels, just get from point A to point B and grab the flag just like the classic 2D Mario games. And the reason they did that, and a lot of 3DS games were made with kind of that idea in mind, because it's a system that you play on the go. So Nintendo had this mentality, well, like for console games that you're going to be playing on the TV, that's when you're going to be sitting there, you're going to be dedicating a larger amount of time. You're going to lock in, focus in. Whereas handheld games, maybe you've just got like 10 minutes on a bus commute or something to be playing. So they wanted to have these short levels that you could complete quickly. But now, the lines have kind of blurred because obviously Nintendo isn't, they don't have their own dedicated handheld and console anymore. It's all just kind of merged into one. So I think it's kind of cool how Nintendo's been making these games like Breath of the Wild. Mario Odyssey kind of did that too, really. But then also Donkey Kong Bonanza here, where these games that are larger in scope than ever before, but they also have these little micro challenges that you can do, like whether it be the shrines or the ruins here in this game. It also makes me think of like Sega did this with Sonic Frontiers, where you've got this these open sandbox levels that you're running around, but you would find what's basically that game's equivalent of shrines, but it's called cyberspace. And you would do these little, linear platforming challenges that felt like a traditional, boost formula Sonic level or whatever. So yeah, and there's a lot of variety in them. You've got some that are like 2D platforming challenges that look like an old classic Donkey Kong Country level. I hope they'll be comparable in size, maybe not quite as big, but I would like to see them be more or less like new Donkey Kong Country levels. I think that would be really cool. And then you've got some that are more puzzle oriented, I guess closer to Breath of the Wild shrines. Those ones probably won't necessarily be my favorite. Like they show one where there's like a bunch of these like spiked balls rolling down a hill, and so you have to like make a hole in the ground for them to fall into. But I think I'll probably still enjoy them. But again, like the shrines in Breath of the Wild weren't necessarily my favorite part. I'm not like super into like puzzles necessarily. But then they've also got ones where it's like defeat the enemies within the time limit, which feels very classic, like GameCube. I feel like there was a lot of games back in that day that would have a lot of little challenges like that, so that makes me a little nostalgic. But yeah, I'm excited, especially again for the platforming challenges and like the 2D ones. There's a lot of elements about this game, honestly, that kind of feel like they're borrowing from Splatoon. because a lot of those challenges feel like Splatoon 2's Octo expansion in particular, where you'd have all these little micro challenges. Like there's one where Donkey Kong's in a mine cart and he's driving in laps around this statue of the game's main villains, the Void Company, which we'll talk more about those later. Yeah, you're having to throw projectiles at them and blow it up, and it kind of like within a time limit, and it kind of reminds me of Splatoon 2, where there would be challenges where it's like there might would be this statue or something, and it would be like you would have a certain amount of time to paint like 99% of the statue in ink, or chisel out. There might would be like all these blocks like Minecraft or something, and you would have to break them apart and try to carefully chisel it out without destroying one of the vital ones that needs left to make a certain picture. And so I kind of got those vibes from it as well. Some of the music and also the bosses also seemed very Splatoon-esque. I think actually when they were showing a little montage of some of the bosses that you fight, which are these rock monsters, where Donkey Kong can like rip a chunk of it off and just beat him to death with it. Like how metal is that? It's like some kind of like Norse like Viking crap, like some Beowulf stuff where you just like rip somebody's arm off and just just start wailing on them with their own limbs. Um, but yeah, some of those bosses looked very similar to something from Splatoon. I don't remember if it was called like the Octo Stamper or something like that. I think from the first Splatoon game there was a boss that looked similar to that. There was one that rolls around and like engulfs itself in fire, so it's this like rock ball that's like engulfed in flames rolling around. And it reminded me of the boss of I guess it was the Elden Volcano, if I'm remembering right, in Skyward Sword, the one that looks like Mike Wazowski. He's got that like one eyeball. It's the second Monsters Inc. reference in this video already. But yeah, Splatoon, I enjoy the Splatoon single player, so I think that's kind of cool. It's obviously one of Nintendo's bigger franchises, so I guess it shouldn't be too terribly surprising that they're taking some inspiration there again with like, there was some quirky music in there, a lot of music variety. You've got these really emotional and in other cases really kind of like pumping songs, I guess, like kind of like rock or pop songs sung by Pauline, that really just kind of get you going. Then you've also got kind of like the more traditional like jazz music, like you would expect from Donkey Kong, like that Jungle Hijinks theme. It's classic from the first Donkey Kong Country. But then you've also got in there and a bunch of like remixes of classic Donkey Kong music from the country games, as well as the Nintendo 64, like the music that plays. It's like Ramby's theme. But yeah, just a lot of good music that we've heard so far. I really like the Pauline songs. I think quite a bit better than like Jump Up Superstar from Super Mario Odyssey, and then what is it, Break Free, Lead the Way, or whatever, which is like the ending one when you're on the moon. Which are okay songs, but after a while I thought they got kind of a little obnoxious. So I'm glad that Pauline's got some new music that they can pull from instead of referencing the same couple of Pauline songs over and over again ad nauseum that I'm kind of sick of at this point. But yeah, they of course showed off a lot of the mechanics that you can do with the rocks. Donkey Kong can pretty much, he can punch through anything. He can punch downward and just wham through the ground, down through the terrain. And he can, like we said earlier, rip off large chunks and attack with them, or he can like surf on them, do like a little Beyblade sort of thing, get on top of it and ride it and plow through enemies. Some terrain has bombs you can chuck and throw it and make explosions, and a lot of these we already knew about. The different things that he could do. They kind of spend the first few minutes of the direct just kind of recapping us on all of Donkey Kong's different moves. He can chunk jump, where he can take a piece of the terrain, jump, and then throw it beneath him, which gives him another like upwards arc as kind of a makeshift double jump. So that's kind of interesting. He's got his classic roll move, and he can also climb. And seemingly there doesn't appear to be like a stamina meter like in Zelda. Donkey Kong has like endless stamina, I guess, and can just climb forever. Probably not on every surface, I would imagine. But that's pretty cool, and it makes sense because obviously Donkey Kong, he's got a lot more upper body strength than Link. No offense to Link, but apes are like what 10 times stronger than, or maybe 20 times stronger than the average person. Actually, I think, and they tend to be a lot more top heavy than bottom heavy. So it makes sense that Donkey Kong would be equipped to do that. And you can clap to reveal hidden things in the walls and in the ground that you can burrow to and get. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and there's some surfaces that are extra strong and that are too strong for Donkey Kong to punch through. However, something new that we learned about in this presentation is that DK can go Bonanza mode, hence the title of the game, Donkey Kong Bonanza, where he essentially hulks out and goes Super Saiyan, not too dissimilar from the Giga Cat Mario or whatever from Bowser's Fury, and can break through, I think, pretty much any terrain, they say, and he's got different forms, so he can transform into a zebra, which enables him to run more quickly, and he can run on water, and he can, I guess, run on, thin platforms that'll break away. I guess he can get across those no problem as a zebra, and he can also transform into an ostrich. And I feel like that needs to be a meme when the announcer's just like, yeah, ostrich bonanza, because it just sounds so ridiculous out of context, even in context. But yeah, so Donkey Kong can sprout wings and fly and drop like grenade eggs beneath him. So it's pretty cool functionality wise. I think the transformations look a little weird, a little awkward, seeing Donkey Kong as like this, because he still maintains his like ripped buffness when he turns into a zebra, and same for when he becomes an ostrich. Very very weird. I feel like there's gonna be, if there's not already, I'm probably gonna come across a lot of really weird, disturbing furry fan art of that I really don't want to see. Some very NSFW 18 plus stuff that's going to pop up in my Twitter feed that I'm really not going to be happy about. But yeah, so Donkey Kong, he can Hulk out like that, I guess, when Pauline sings a certain song, and you'll be temporarily strong for a limited amount of time, and then you can replenish it by gathering Bonandium, I think. This game has all sorts of collectibles. They talk about these banana gems, essentially, that Donkey Kong harnesses and gets Bonandium from. There's also Bonandium gems, which are a form of currency that you can trade in at a shop. And you've got gold that you can collect, which is also another form of currency. And there's all of these collectible fossils that you can find, and maybe even more beyond that. I think I remember seeing someone point out in like an analysis that I was watching that there's apparently some kind of collectible, I think they show on the screen, where Donkey Kong has like one of four in a given area, and it's like these, I don't know, it's something that's got like googly eyes on it or something. I'm really not sure what to make of it. So yeah, there's like 4 or 5, maybe more different types of collectibles in this game, so that's pretty exciting. There's probably going to be just stuff all over the place in this sandbox area, very densely packed, probably not going to feel very empty. And we were talking about the different things that you can do with the rock power, and a couple I neglected to mention. We talked about how you can take the terrain and rip it out and throw it and stuff, but different types of terrain has different effects. So there's this one world that's like, I guess, kind of reminds me of like the Freeze Frame Galaxy or Freeze Flame Galaxy from Mario Galaxy, which is like a half hot, half cold world, where there's lava, but there's also snow, and so Donkey Kong can, rip up a chunk of snow and throw it and, melt the lava, so that way he can cross. But probably the neatest one for me is that he can pull up chunks of wet sand, like in the ocean levels, and he can throw it and like stick it together and make like a bridge or whatever out of it. I'm assuming you could probably also stack it vertically and have like a tower Donkey Kong can climb to get to new heights. So that's really cool. I'm excited to see all the stuff you can do with that, and it's funny because like it feels so relatable because the week before last, my family and I went on vacation to the beach, and now I'm not the biggest beach person, to be honest. I played in the ocean for a while, but at one point I got a little bored, so I was just like, I'm just gonna like dig a hole in the sand and just see how big of a hole I can dig until everybody else is ready to go back inside. And so I started digging it, and as I'm digging into the sand, I just picked a dry, bunch of sand, and then all of a sudden, I dig down and it starts filling up with water. So I've got this hole full of wet sand, and I'm digging and I'm sticking the wet sand together, and I'm messing around. I built some sand castles and stuff. So I don't know. It's just funny. I very seldom, I don't live along the coast, so I'm very rarely dabbling with wet sand. But for whatever reason, they announced this right after I get back from from messing around and making little sand sculptures and stuff at the beach. So that's kind of it's kind of funny, but. But yeah, it looks really cool. I love all the stuff you can do with it, and I really don't know why, but for whatever reason, it doesn't bother me the way that it did for other games, and the way that I sort of felt when I saw the first trailer for Donkey Kong Bonanza. Because Nintendo here lately, they've been making a lot of these games that encourages a lot of experimentation on the part of the player, and a lot of times I don't necessarily want that, I don't necessarily think that giving the player too much freedom is always a good thing. So, for instance, in Tears of the Kingdom, I never necessarily liked how you could make these Zonai builds, these Zonai constructions that essentially enabled you to just or with the Ultra Hand and fusing stuff together, that would just let you completely cheese some of the shrines in that game, just completely break the level design and do it in ways that were not at all intended by the developer. To me, I just don't really love that necessarily. If it's a shrine that's you're supposed to go about it this way and spend a good 5 minutes racking your brain trying to come up with this one solution, but it's instead I can just do this right here, just conjure up a whatever and just get straight to the end. So I don't necessarily love that. It didn't bother me as much, but to a little bit lesser an extent. Echoes of Wisdom felt similar, where you could make copies of all this stuff as Zelda, these echoes, and you can just make blocks of water, Minecraft style, stack them on top of each other to get to new heights, or use a spider, conjure a spider, and cleave to them. I forget what they call it in the game, but where you can follow the spider's path as it climbs its way up a tree or something. To me, I felt like that stuff kind of can break the game design a little bit in a way that's not always necessarily satisfying. It's just, again, kind of like the Mario Odyssey thing, where it's just this is Puff. I don't feel like I really did anything, because it's in some ways, it's it feels like you took the easy way out, because you did this artificial solution to just kind of just break the game design a little bit. But for whatever reason, I don't know, but I really like all the stuff that you can do with breaking through the terrain, and all the stuff that you can do, how the game encourages you to experiment with these different types of terrain, and how each one has different effects. I really don't know why, again, what the difference is between this and those couple of Zelda games and stuff, but it's really resonating with me a lot more. So I don't know. They just made it look so exciting in the presentation, I guess, because, again, the first few minutes of this Direct was kind of going over stuff that we already kind of knew about, but just with the pumping music and everything. They just recontextualize it in a way that, the first few minutes was still better than the entirety of the Mario Kart World presentation. So I don't know what went wrong with that Mario one. I was afraid that it set a new precedent that all the game-specific Nintendo Directs moving forward would follow, but that's clearly not the case, because this one was very good. It was very well-paced. It was constantly exciting, even when it was showing us stuff that we already knew about. It was interesting. It was entertaining. But let's jump ship a little bit. Well, I guess, because I kind of got sidetracked, I do want to go back, and we were talking about all the different types of collectibles. There's a bunch of different shops that you can go to as well. And some are more basic. It's you can buy these balloons that function kind of different than how they did in the old Donkey Kong Country games, where they were just extra lives for Donkey Kong. But in this one, the balloons, I believe, keep you from dying if you fall off a cliff, if I'm not mistaken. And other ones like that are kind of temporary, expungible items, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. I don't know. Not a permanent upgrade or anything. But then you can also buy costumes. You can get different outfits for Donkey Kong and for Pauline, and you can change you can change Donkey Kong's fur color. Um, so that's kind of cool. But you could also do that in Mario Odyssey. You could change Mario's costume and stuff like that. But it didn't offer any like stat boosts. But this is actually going to be more like how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were, and also Echoes of Wisdom, where the different costumes actually do augment your abilities. And so if you have a certain outfit on for Donkey Kong, he'll be able to swim faster through the water and different stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool, and I imagine the ones for Pauline will function similarly, where maybe like make her music abilities stronger or something. I really don't know. But I do think that's pretty cool. I kind of hope they do a thing, because like a lot of other games like Fantasy Life, which I've been playing, does that, where you can independently change, like you can customize what you're wearing to be like whatever suits you, like whatever you think looks cooler, but also have like the stats of the certain combination. You know what I'm saying? To where like you can still get the buffs of like one of the costumes that you already have unlocked, like even if you're not necessarily wearing that costume, so you can kind of mix and match however you want to. I think that would be nice. I don't necessarily know if I see Nintendo doing that, but if they did, it would be really cool. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then you can also pay, I guess, to like unlock a little pad for Donkey Kong to just kind of chill at, and he can like nap on a little canopy, and you can like listen to the game's music. I don't know how necessary that's going to be. Like, open up one of them in like the first world or something, where you can do that and mess with like the music, put on whatever music you want. But I don't really know if I see the purpose of like spending your in-game currency to get that in like every world, unless there's something more to it than that. Do you have to pay for that in every world to 100% the game? I don't know. But I just feel like, yeah, that's kind of whatever. I'm not like offended that it's there, but it doesn't really seem like it adds that much, other than again being able to change the game's music, which kind of that's kind of one of the things that people crap on Mario Kart World for, where you can't shuffle through the music on like a radio or something in the game. Really, and I'll talk about it more in a future podcast. I thought about doing it this week, but then they had the Donkey Kong presentation, and I wanted to talk about that. But just kind of like my thoughts on the Switch 2 so far, and like Mario Kart World as a launch game. So I don't want to say too much, because I'm going to save that for a future episode. But I will say, I'm honestly not blown away by Mario Kart World so far. I'm a little disappointed in it, to be honest. Very disappointed in it, to be completely honest. I don't think it's a terrible game, but I also certainly don't think it's worth $80. And I also don't think it's good enough to be a launch game for the brand new console. Donkey Kong Bonanza, however, I kind of think, I'm feeling at this point, I'm like, yeah, I feel like this is the big game that they should have launched the Switch 2 with. And then Mario Kart World could have came out in the same time frame Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out, which was like the following month game, because the Switch 2 or the Switch 1 launched in March of 2017, and then I believe Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out in April. So they could have done the same thing here, have the Switch 2 come out with Donkey Kong in June, and then have the Mario Kart game come out in July. Because I feel like with a new console launch, you really want like a big, meaty, like single player campaign. At least I do. And not necessarily a multiplayer focused game. Because like, I don't really have any like friends or anybody that I know that like was able to get a Switch 2 at launch. So it's like, well, I don't really have anybody to play Mario Kart Online with yet that I know, like in my personal life. So I don't know. I feel like they could have waited on that until more people have a Switch. That way it's more feasible to be able to play multiplayer with people. Maybe even make that the holiday game. I don't know. But yeah, so far most of my Mario Kart World experience has been kind of single player, and maybe that's a big part of why I'm not loving it yet necessarily. But I don't know. I really think Donkey Kong Bonanza, I don't know if it's the same level of ambition necessarily, but I feel like in a lot of ways it feels like it could be this console's Breath of the Wild moment. So I really think they should have launched with it. But yeah. Switching gears, we'll talk a little bit about the bosses in this game. So the main antagonists are the Void Company or Void Co. And I don't know exactly what they're plotting. They're trying to. I don't know if it's kind of like a race against them, like they're trying to get to the center of the earth before Donkey Kong because they're gonna do something. I don't know what exactly. But there's three members, at least that we know of. I kind of hope there's more because I feel like three's not a lot. Um, but you have Poppy Kong, who is a female. They're all Kongs, by the way, so they're all apes, just like DK. So you've got Poppy Kong, and she's kind of like a secretary to the main villain. Some people, I think, on like social media have been saying that she's sexy. I don't see it personally. Uh, she's a monkey, but to each his own, I guess. And then there's Grumpy Kong, who is kind of this big burly guy, and I guess he's responsible for making all of the like the sculptures that attack Donkey Kong in the game. So like I don't know if you fight him if he's the same boss every time. I kind of hope not. I'd like to see more variety than that, where like each boss is like Grumpy Kong in like a new rock formation that he's created. Because again, you saw in the trailer like he makes one that's like a big cube that attacks you, and one that's like a big ball of fire rolling around. I think he's in that as well. So you've got to like break through it and then beat him up once you burst through the rock. But I don't know. I could see that getting a little bit repetitious and maybe not that fun. So the bosses is one thing I'm not sold on yet. That's not to say it couldn't get better. But I'm a little cautiously optimistic about the bosses. I think it's interesting that his name is Grumpy Kong because that's very close to Cranky Kong, so it makes me wonder if there's some kind of a relation there. Do they have a history? Because both their names are associated with being kind of easily, having an angry temperament. So I don't know. Do they know each other? Maybe, maybe not. And then the leader of Void Co. is Void Kong, I think is his name, which is kind of a very on the nose name. I'm curious why he's named that and like the significance of them being called Void Co. Because a void obviously is like emptiness, nothingness, like a black hole, a vortex, So it's like, is he trying to get to the center of the earth because he wants to destroy it? Like, what's his aim here? He wants to make a world of nothingness. Like, what's the significance of his name being Void? Because it has to mean something. I refuse to believe that name is completely null and void. So we'll have to find out about that. And again, they are Kongs, and I know that's kind of thrown some people for a loop who've been like, oh, well, what does that mean? Have we ever seen that before? Because does that mean they're part of like the Donkey Kong family, like they're all related? I don't think that's necessarily the case, and it's really not the first time we've seen it. Because in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat back on the GameCube, I don't remember if that came out in like 2003, 2004, whenever that game came out, 2005 maybe. I was very small when that game came out. But a bunch of the bosses in that game, there was one that had like dreadlocks that was named like Dread Kong that you had to fight, and then one of the bosses was there was like I think a Karate Kong and a Kung Fu Kong, and they all looked really cool. Look up the designs of the bosses from Donkey Kong Jungle Beat if you've never played that game, which I imagine a lot of people haven't. But yeah, some interesting evil Kong designs in that game that you had to fight. I wouldn't be disappointed if they brought some of those back. Honestly, they were pretty cool. But yeah, that was a game that was made. I believe it was in house by Nintendo. I think it was the same team maybe that went on to make Mario Galaxy. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, because that would have been. It makes sense that there would be Donkey Kong Jungle Beat influence here to some capacity in this game, because I get, and also the clapping, Donkey Kong being able to clap to like reveal stuff. Because for those who don't know, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, it's iffy if you want to consider that like a mainline Donkey Kong platformer or more of a spin-off, because you do platform, from level to level. But you use these like bongos. There was like this bongo accessory, and so you'd have to tap the right one to make Donkey Kong move right, left one to make him move left, tap both of them to make him jump, and then you would clap to attack, because the bongos had a mic so they could pick up on clapping. It was a very weird system, but I definitely have a lot of nostalgia for that game. I hope it eventually comes to Switch Online now that they've got GameCube games on there, because if they do, I have my GameCube controller adapter that has an HDMI that plugs into the Switch, and I still have my old bongos, so I can plug those in and actually play the game with the bongos after all these years. So that would be really fun, really funny. I could see that being a fun video to maybe do on the channel if that happens. Um, but uh, but yeah, so it makes sense they would take influence from that game, and yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. Where else I wanted to go with this? But yeah, so it's not, people are kind of like flabbergasted about them being Kongs, but again, this isn't the first time we've seen evil Kongs in a Donkey Kong game. I want to say even in the original Donkey Kong Country game on the Super Nintendo, there's like an enemy that's like these orangutans that throw barrels at you. And I want to say they might actually be called something Kong, and they're an enemy, from the first Country game. But it is a little bit unfortunate that King K. Rool seems to be absent. Some people are like hoping, with bated breath, that maybe King K. Rool is going to be the secret final boss or have some kind of cameo in the game. I'm not necessarily expecting it. It'd be cool if he does. I'd gladly be proven wrong, but I don't necessarily see that happening. But I don't think that's my enjoyment of the game isn't going to hinge on that. It would be awesome if K. Rool shows up, but honestly, I think that the Void Co. Antagonists here are pretty cool. So I'm content. Even if we don't get to see King K. Rool come back in this game. I think a lot of people are just frustrated because they brought King K. Rool back for the first time in probably 10 years or something in Smash Brothers Ultimate because he was one of the most requested characters. Sakurai listened and added him to the roster and everything. And I think everybody kind of thought that was going to mark a resurgence of King K. Rool cropping up in other games. But that's just not happened, and now Smash Ultimate is like 6 or 7 years old at this point. And, we've not had any other games with Donkey Kong. So I really think people wouldn't be too upset about King K. Rool not being in this game if he was at least given an opportunity to show up in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or if he had been in, Mario Golf or Mario Tennis or something. But as it is, King K. Rool has not really come back. Even like in the theme park, there's no King K. Rool representation, which I think is really strange. And it makes me wonder if we ever get like a Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Country animated movie by Illumination, would they even go with King K. Rool as the main villain? I don't know. So, I get why people are kind of desperate for more King K. Rool, and I would very much like to see it too. But I'm okay with Donkey Kong having a different villain, at least for this game. I would love to see maybe if Retro Studios ever gets the opportunity to make a third Donkey Kong Country game, maybe after they finish, Prime 4 and everything. Then maybe considering the idea of like bringing back the Kremlings or something, but I'm not too upset about it not happening here. K. Rool is a very great character. I love him. But yeah, if he doesn't show up in this game, I'm not going to be devastated. It is kind of weird though. They kind of tease at something, and some people might say, well, that's just copium, but it is kind of weird how the way just the inflection of the narrator when he's talking about how like Pauline singing can remove these like barriers, this like purple like tape stuff or whatever, that it says that someone has been leaving behind, and it's like he really drags out that someone to kind of make you be like, oh, who's he talking about? So I don't know. It would be kind of anticlimactic if he's literally just talking about the Void Co. people who we already knew about from the presentation, back in April. But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, we talked about the villains. I'm looking down at my notes here to see if there's anything, see what all else I want to talk about. Yeah, so I guess another thing we can talk about is the amiibo. They announced that we're going to get a new Donkey Kong amiibo with his redesign, and it's going to have a little Pauline on his back, which is cute. I definitely plan on picking it up. It's going to be $30. I know a lot of people are kind of upset about that because amiibo, when they first released, they were like $12.99, which back then they were manufactured in a way that looked a lot cheaper, Like some of those early ones, like the Smash Brothers version of Link, was rough. I actually got rid of that amiibo because I didn't care for it. I was like, I don't really need that in my collection, especially since they came out with like a proper Twilight Princess Link amiibo. So I've got that one instead. Um, but but yeah, they went from $12.99. Then they started making them with more quality, and they raised it, I think, to $15.99 around the time that the Switch One came out, and people were already upset about that. Now they're almost doubling the price of Amiibo, and I know some of that's because of like the tariff situation might have bumped it up a few dollars. Not anything like extraordinary, but I know the price of their different peripherals like controllers and Joy Cons and everything else did go up a little bit as a result of the tariff situation. Um, but I don't know. To me, paying $30 for an amiibo is a much easier pill to swallow than paying $80 for for Mario Kart World again. I'm sorry to keep beating that dead horse, but that's just how I feel personally. Everybody has their own assessment of what they value a product to be worth or not worth. But amiibo, if you're an avid amiibo collector like I am, some of those there for a long time were just like very rare and hard to find, and the only way you could get one is if you paid an exorbitant amount on eBay. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but when I first started, like my first job, I started working retail at Walmart, and I kind of had some disposable income. I didn't really have any like responsibilities or like a lot of bills to pay or like a family to take care of. So I would treat myself to some stuff. And I think the most I paid for an amiibo during that time, I might have spent like $80 to get like the squishy Metroid amiibo. But it seems like here lately, Nintendo has gotten much better about keeping supplies in stock, so you're not getting everything, like whether it's amiibo or the Switch 2 console itself, or even the GameCube controllers. I was able to get one of those pretty early on. They were sold out at the first time they went available. But it wasn't too long after that they added the GameCube controller, the wireless ones for Switch 2, GameCube, NSO, back to their to the My Nintendo store where you could buy it, and I was able to order one and got it. So to me, I'm okay with amiibos retailing at a more expensive price if Nintendo's having more of them readily available in store shelves to where I can easily and conveniently get one and not have to pay a scalper an arm and a leg anyway, because in some cases I had to do that. Like the Boo amiibo that glows in the dark, I might have spent like $50 on that one. I don't remember exactly how much I paid for it. There's some amiibo I think that are like really rare that go for maybe like a few hundred. So for me personally, again, if Nintendo can keep them in stock and they're not getting bought up by scalpers, if anything, maybe them raising the price, maybe that'll drive down demand to the point where people won't be wanting to scalp it, even if they are harder to come by. In which case, I'll be able to get it for cheaper than I might would get from a scalper. So I don't know. That's just kind of the way I look at it. I'm not too doom and gloom about it. I do kind of get tired. I think it's cool that they're still doing amiibo, that they carried that over from the Switch 1, and they're still making new ones, because I love how everybody keeps thinking they're winding it down. Because it's like, oh, they've done the last, like all the way back, like with the Wii U. It's like they're coming out with the Switch now. They've given us, all we got. We're just waiting on the Bayonetta and Corrin amiibos or whatever. And once they do that, it seems like they're winding down. They're making less and less amiibo. Will the Nintendo Switch have amiibo support? Excuse me. And then, that January 2017 presentation, they announced, yes, there will be amiibo supported on this thing. And then, really, it was maybe just a couple years after that. I feel like I can remember, like when Link's Awakening came out and they announced the Link's Awakening amiibo, and people were like, "That's like the only amiibo coming out right now." It seems like Nintendo's winding down. And then, especially once we got to the end of the console's life, and it's like, well, the Switch 2 is about to come out. They've already given us, Sora. They're making less and less amiibo. Are they gonna still have amiibo for Switch 2? But no, amiibo's still going strong. I think that's great to see. But I'm a little tired of how often that Nintendo makes a new version of an amiibo that I already have. Because it's like Nintendo has so many great characters across all of their franchises. And so it's kind of like, man, it's another Donkey Kong. Why not, like, we've never had a Cranky Kong amiibo. We've never had a Dixie Kong amiibo, Give us one of those. Even like the Void Co. Give us an amiibo of them. Because again, I like their designs. I think they're pretty cool. A Funky Kong amiibo, that'd be pretty sick. Where's Funky Kong? We've not seen him in Donkey Kong Bonanza yet. I wonder if he's going to be there. But even a Rambi amiibo, the rhinoceros, could be kind of cool. But yeah, so I'm a little bit about another Donkey Kong. Again, it is with his new design, and it does look a lot better than, because like we already had two different variations of Donkey Kong, the Smash Brothers line from Smash Wii U, and then also the Super Mario series one where he's got a different pose and he looks a little bit different. So now this is the third Donkey Kong. But he does have, the young Pauline on his back, so that's kind of cute. So it's kind of two characters in one. But it's like, well, how come we've not, because Pauline's been around since like 1981. She's like one of the OG Nintendo characters from the original arcade Donkey Kong game, where she's, an adult and has been an adult in several other games. So it's like, but we still don't have just like a regular adult Pauline amiibo. It's just this kid version of her that's going to be in this new game. So I was like, well, why don't we have that yet, And again, all the other characters that I named, there's lots of other characters in the Mario franchise and like, Zelda franchise and all these other franchises. It's like, but no, here's Inkling Girl number 78, this time with magenta colored ink. Or here's our 30th variation of Link. So I don't know. I just get kind of tired of seeing the same character. But this one does look cool. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I don't know. It's cute. I haven't heard Pauline on Donkey Kong's back. If they were gonna give us a kid Pauline amiibo, in a way, I would almost rather it just be her by herself and like larger. Because again, I just hate having like just so many Donkey Kong amiibos. So I don't know. But either way, though, I still think the amiibo looks cool. I'm probably going to pick it up and everything. Moving on from that, what else do I want to talk about here? A lot of this I've already covered. One thing I would have liked to have seen from the Nintendo Direct, I would have liked to have seen like at least one more environment, because like pretty much all the locations they showed are ones that we've already seen from the first presentation. There's kind of like the wooded, like foresty area. There's the sand area. There's the one, I don't really love the look of this one that's like, it's like grassy, but it's like the grass is like yellow. I don't know. It just reminds me, there's a lot of games that kind of, like that particular world just looks very generic and reminds me a lot of like Breath of the Wild's art style, and also all the games that copy Breath of the Wild, like, Immortals Phoenix Rising, or even, not that this game copied Breath of the Wild, but it also kind of reminds me a little bit of like Fortnite's aesthetic a little bit. So I don't know if I love that world, but we've seen the snow world, the one that's kind of like canyony. I don't know how you would describe it. It's like sunset, and it's like very rocky. I guess it's kind of like a canyon world. So who knows how many more worlds are going to be there. I would hope there's going to be a decent amount, and that none of them are as short as like Mario Galaxy. I thought it was kind of disappointing. Like the Cloud Kingdom and the Ruined Kingdom just kind of are there for like one boss fight, and that's it. I thought that was really anticlimactic, and maybe, I don't know, it felt like maybe that part of the game was a little bit rushed. Like they had grander ideas for those couple of worlds, but they had to scrap them. I don't know, that might not be the case, but that's what it felt like. So I hope there's no worlds in this game that's like that, where it's like, oh, here's this really cool looking volcano world, but like, oh, we don't get to explore it. It's just, we're fighting it's just an arena platform for us to fight one of the Void Co people, and then we move on. So hopefully nothing like that. But yeah, other than that one world I was talking about, I think the game's aesthetic overall is growing on me. But since its reveal, I have always been kind of down on the game's art style a little bit, and still kind of feel that way. Like Donkey Kong, it's not necessarily even a criticism of his redesign, but just kind of the art direction they went in with it, where I remember from Donkey Kong Country Returns to Tropical Freeze, I remember Satoru Iwata toting how it was a big priority for him, how he really wanted Retro to give Donkey Kong like individually rendered strands of fur, because this was the first HD Donkey Kong game, and so now you can see how fuzzy he is. This game, I feel like, takes a step back a little bit. in Donkey Kong Bonanza, where for whatever reason they go with giving him like these kind of like jagged like clumps of fur that almost makes it look more like Donkey Kong has feathers. It doesn't really look like fur to me. It just looks kind of weird, like a Dr. Seuss story or something. Like he looks like a who, you know. So I don't really love that. I think Pauline's kid design looks cute, but it just, and really even I think Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong and Cranky and Dixie Kong, I think they all look fine. Um, but yeah, I just don't like how Donkey Kong's fur looks. And again, some of the environments look a little generic-y, kind of Breath of the Wild or Fortnite kind of knockoffy a little bit. I really wish, you know, and people might strongly disagree, and that's fine, you know, but I feel like at least to this point, I've not really, particularly when it comes to like first party Nintendo games, I've not seen any Switch 2 games that have like wowed me graphically yet necessarily. Mario Kart World did not wow me, you know. I guess technically that game is more impressive than Mario Kart 8. You know, you've got the whole like open world and everything, and race between tracks, and it's got a better draw distance and all that. But I don't know. Like when I'm racing on Moo Moo Meadows in Mario Kart World, I feel like it just doesn't look as good as it did in 8 Deluxe. And so, you know, like with this Donkey Kong game, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on a technical level with all the particle effects and I guess the memory, you know, with being able to rip off these chunks of terrain and break it and everything. And I guess wouldn't be able to run on the Switch One. Same with Mario Kart World. But just looking at individual screenshots of those games, just to the naked eye, it's hard to really look at that and say, like, wow, this is like next gen power, you know? And I get not everything has to be like ultra realistic, you know? But I feel like that, you know, since the Super Nintendo, the Donkey Kong franchise with Donkey Kong Country and its pre rendered graphics has always really prioritized having very, very good realistic graphics. And I think Retro Studios carried that on. And I mean, there's cartoony elements, of course. Um, but I don't know, like, and for example, when I see like those ruins challenges, and like some of them's like a 2D side-scrolling, like an homage to the old Donkey Kong Country games, I don't think those look as good as like Tropical Freeze, for example. I wouldn't want a whole 2D Donkey Kong game that looked like that, you know. I just think it's kind of a step backwards. And again, this is all just my opinion. You know, I'm still going to get the game, and I think it's still going to be great. I've praised it for the vast majority of this video. And when I actually have it in my hands and I'm playing it, it might resonate with me more. But as it is, I don't know. And some of Donkey Kong's facial expressions I don't love, to be honest, are a little too goofy for me. Like whenever he's got like the bananas in his eyes and he got his tongue out. Like it looks like a very like, it looks like a Snapchat filter face, you know? Like Donkey Kong's being a TikTok social media influencer, and I don't love that. But that aside, you know, otherwise I like what we've seen in the game. Like I said, I would have liked to have seen one more world shown off in this direct that we hadn't already seen before, and I don't think there was. But I get why they might want to save that, so I'm not like too devastated about that, as long as the final game does have plenty of worlds, including ones that we've not seen yet. Um, but yeah, let me see. Is there anything else here that I want to talk about? Yeah, I guess going off the art direction thing, this is another thing I wrote down. This is a problem that I had back with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch 1, and I still find myself having a problem with it on Switch 2 with Mario Kart World and with this game. And on the Switch 1, I thought like, oh, it's because of graphical limitations because they're trying to like mask the draw distance so you can't see all the pop in. And to an extent, maybe that was true. What I'm talking about is like the fog, like the haze effects. But the Switch 2 is supposed to have all this extra horsepower, but they're still doing that, you know? And I feel like there's so many parts where I'm driving around in Mario Kart World, and it looks like that's going to be the case in some of these worlds in Donkey Kong Bonanza, where it's like, it's so foggy, you know, it's everything's so hazy. And it's like, I maybe like maybe on a technical level, maybe it's really impressive, really realistic, really accurate haze, but it's like Nintendo, you can do 4K graphics now, and I've got this 4K OLED TV that looks really sharp. And, the whole reason that we want games in 4K is so that way they're clearer, so that way we can see them. So I feel like if your game has like a whole bunch of like hazy effects, that kind of defeats the whole point of the clarity of it being in 4K, because it's like, well, I can't see 20 miles off into the distance because you've got all this fog in the way. And maybe there are still issues with draw distance. I don't know. But I just think that's kind of unfortunate, because it's like, it makes it harder to appreciate the step up and not being able to see all the crunchy, jagged pixels, because it's like, well, yeah, maybe I can't see those, but I also can't see what's off in the distance because it's all fuzzy and it looks washed out because of all this fog. That's not for the whole game, but certain parts of the game, some of those levels I look and I'm just like, can't they just like, can we just turn off the fog, please? But I don't know. That might be a controversial opinion. I'm not sure. Other thing to note here, I talked about how this game I feel like has more voice acting than a lot of other or sorry, not voice acting. That was another thing I had wrote down on here. But it's got more story than a lot of other Nintendo games, particularly Mario games. And I'm very interested. I don't know if anybody else caught this. I've not really heard anybody else talk about it. But, there's this line where Pauline says, I'm going with DK, so you just stay away. So it seems like the Void Company needs Pauline, like she's somehow instrumental. No pun intended. She's the opposite of instrumental because she sings. But instrumental to their plans. Like they need her to get her to like the center of the planet to do something. And there's that one shot in the scene, like right before the direct ends, where Pauline and Donkey Kong reach out to each other. She says DK right before she's swallowed by like an eel. And so it seems like throughout this adventure, it's like Donkey Kong has to stay alert of the Void Company trying to kidnap Pauline because they need her power for some reason. So I'm interested to learn more about that. Maybe that's going to be like the final boss. Like they force her to sing and cause them to go into Bonanza mode. So you're fighting like a hulked out version of that Void Kong or whatever. That could be really interesting. Or they need her singing to like break a seal that's at the center of the earth that's concealing something. I don't know. Some people have speculated maybe it's King K. Rool that's down there at the center and they're trying to free him. Again, I don't think that's the case. I'm not expecting that. But yeah, it seems like they want to harness her singing ability for something. So that'll be interesting to see. And they give her a lot more characterization again than you see from a lot of Nintendo games because she talks about wanting to grow up to be a singer, that's her dream. And she's voice acted. Nobody else speaks as far as we know, but I think that's okay because she's like the only human in this world that's otherwise, apes and stuff. I think it'd be kind of weird to see Donkey Kong speaking, for example. So I think it works. I think it's cool that she has a speaking voice, and I think her voice acting is honestly pretty good. I'll be honest, I hate the voice acting in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think it sounds so corny and just so bad, and it makes me cringe so much. But like it just feels so forced, like like the actors are trying so hard to act that it's just not believable. But I think whoever's doing the voice of Kid Pauline, I think it sounds really good. Again, I think her songs are really good. Yeah, I think it's cool that they're leaning into more of a kind of a cinematic direction with this game. And I guess just to go back real quick, what I was talking about with the art style, obviously Donkey Kong games are always going to be cartoony to an extent. But I don't know. I think if you do like a side-by-side comparison of this game with Astrobot, visually, I think Astrobot sweeps it. And again, that game's different. It's it's more linear point A to point B levels, so it's not like this big open sandbox thing. So maybe they're able to get away with a little bit more. But at the same time, though, the Switch 2, I feel like if it's really somewhere between a PS4 and PS5, or maybe even more close to a PS5 in terms of power, I feel like even with a big open world, it should still be able to have comparable graphics, right? I mean, look at like Cyberpunk running on it and stuff like that. So I don't know. I would have liked to have seen it be a little bit more realistic, just in terms of the texture work and just having each of Donkey Kong's individual, strands of fur rendered and everything. But I don't know. I'm not, you know, at the end of the day, I think most Nintendo gamers, they're kind of used to Nintendo not being on par graphically with the competition. So we play the games first and foremost for the gameplay and not necessarily how they look. Um, Even though Nintendo in a lot of their games does have like a very very good, very beautiful art direction. I'm just not really feeling it for this game, but I still think that in terms of gameplay, it's going to be great. So I'm not gonna say that the game is like ruined because of that or anything. And again, that's just my opinion. Something else to note here: we talked about the different DK Bonanza transformations. His regular ape form, the ostrich, and the zebra. I feel like they got to be hiding at least one more. I think maybe they don't want to show all those. Maybe he could, because like he can turn into an ostrich, so that's like Espresso from the first Donkey Kong Country game. You could ride an ostrich, and she can kind of sprout wings and glide a little bit. So are we going to see transformations based on some of the other animal buddies? Because in the first Donkey Kong Country, you also had Rambi the rhino, who does show up in this game, and it looks like you can ride him. Like there's a sequence, and that's kind of fun. That can add some extra variety to the game. I don't know if it's just a one-off thing or if there's multiple ones, but where Donkey Kong and Pauline are racing in like a Rambi race against Diddy and Dixie Kong, who are also riding a rhinoceros. So I don't know if there'll just be certain points you can ride Rambi or if you can summon him. So maybe you don't actually get to transform into a rhino, although I think that could be cool. But at the very least, if not Rambi, another one was On Guard, which was like a swordfish that could swim underwater really fast. That's a weird thing to me about this game that I don't know if I like that. Seemingly, because like we saw pretty extensive Nintendo Treehouse live footage of them playing the beach level. And whenever they get into the water, it seems like Donkey Kong can only swim on the surface. Like you can't dive under the water. And to me, that's a little bit disappointing if there is no underwater swimming. And I know a lot of people will say that they hate swimming, like, underwater levels, and I get that. But I would like a little bit of that, I know some Zelda games like Twilight Princess let you swim underwater, and Skyward Sword did. But not Breath of the Wild. I always thought that was a little disappointing that you couldn't like dive under the water like you can in like Horizon. Forbidden West. Yeah, that's the one. Zero Dawn's the first one, right? But yeah, with Forbidden West, you can swim underwater. I've not actually played that game. I've only played the first Horizon, so maybe the underwater swimming mechanics suck in that game. I don't know, but I thought that was cool, and I really hoped that like Tears of the Kingdom, when we didn't know what it was going to be called back then, I really hoped that you would be able to get something to actually, because then it would be like, okay, I would be a little bit more okay with exploring the same exact Hyrule map from the first game if I can also dive underwater and explore, the coral reefs below that I could see but couldn't really interact with in the first game. But no, you couldn't do that. And with this game being so heavily based on Mario Odyssey, and that game obviously had underwater swimming, I just find that kind of strange because like Donkey Kong's been no stranger to underwater swimming. I think the first Donkey Kong Country Returns game is like pretty much the only Donkey Kong game that I can think of where Donkey Kong can't swim. He can swim in this game, but again, he just floats on the surface. You can't like dive under, So I don't know. I hope that at some point you can swim underwater. Also, like Mario Kart World, you can only drive. You can race on the surface of the water, like your jet skiing. You can't actually go under the water anymore. So I don't know. Nintendo's become very hydrophobic, I guess, in recent years. I don't know what's going on, um, but but yeah. So I hope there's some of that because like one of the most popular Donkey Kong Country songs is Aquatic Ambience. So there's got to be some point in the game where like you're swimming underwater and that's playing, right? Maybe not. I don't know, but like I'd like to see a little bit of underwater swimming just to kind of mix things up, some variety. Again, I know not everybody loves underwater levels, and I'm not saying it should take up a significant chunk of the game, but I think like a underwater world, like just one underwater world, would be kind of cool. Um, but But yeah, with the costumes, something I forgot to talk about is that. Well, no, I guess I did talk about that each costume has different stats. But in addition to that, there's also a skill tree. And I remember watching the presentation when I watched it, even though I didn't do a live reaction to it. I thought to myself, Arlo's gonna flip out because Arlo's always talking about skill trees. He loves them. He was so excited when Pikmin 4 had it, where you can like upgrade your abilities and stuff. But yeah, I'm maybe not as big of a skill tree nut as Arlo, but I do think that's cool. You can upgrade your individual abilities to where you can, have a stronger attack or, extra health or whatever. I'm really not sure. I didn't take a very close look at all the different items on the skill tree. But I think that's pretty cool, though, that you can upgrade it. And yeah, I think that's probably just about it. Well, I guess we could talk about the art mode. I've not talked about that. The DK artist mode, which I guess the name of it kind of feels like a callback to Mario Artist, which was like this Japan only Mario. It was like a series of Mario games that was on the Nintendo 64 disk drive, which never came out here in the States. Where you could, I think there was one of them where you could it was like sculpting, and so you'd make like 3D models and stuff. And that's basically what this is. And yeah, some people said it's just so out of left field and weird, like why you would have this whole side mode dedicated to using the Switch 2's Joy-Con mouse to make these like little statuettes. But it's not completely un Nintendo. If anything, I think it harkens more back to classic Nintendo, which I think is cool, of just having little bonus stuff like that. It's very similar to Super Mario 64 all the way back in 1996 on the Nintendo 64, where on the title screen, it's a me, Mario, hello, and you take the cursor and drag his face around, and stretch his ears and stretch his hair, and when you let go of it, it makes that noise, that elasticity of it. So yeah, it just kind of seems like they're doing that again, but in a much more interactive and fun way. So I think that's pretty cool. It'll be fun to see what people make. People have already joked that a good number of people are going to make absolutely terrible, inappropriate things, and they probably will. But I think that'll be cool. It'd be cool if maybe they do a thing where Nintendo doesn't do as much with amiibo as I feel like they should. Like you scan that new Donkey Kong and Pauline amiibo that's $30, and all you get for scanning it is like a new costume. So it's kind of that's a little lame. I get you get Pauline, kind of a more classic Pauline costume, which is kind of cool, but eh. um, but I don't know. It could be kind of fun because if you could do a thing where you could save your Donkey Kong artist creation to the amiibo and then scan it on like a friend's console, and now they've got it and can add it to their gallery or whatever. I don't know. That could be kind of fun. But yeah, I think the game looks really cool. One other thing I wrote down here is where's the vines? Donkey Kong's whole shtick, he's an ape. He swings around from vine to vine. I don't think we've seen a single vine in this game yet, have we? Correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I hope he can swing on vines. That'll be very disappointing if there's not at least one level, or like some of those 2D side-scrolling levels where you get to do the classic vine swing. And I might look like a big idiot. Maybe they did show that in there somewhere, but I didn't see it. Yeah, I wrote down here. Oh yeah, the co-op. The game's gonna have 2-player co-op. I wrote down. I think the co-op's kind of lame. It's a little bit better than what they've been doing, but it's kind of an extension of Mario Galaxy, where it had the little pointer controls where the second person could point the Wii remote and shoot star bits and stuff at enemies, and it was really lame. It was who wants to do that? And then Pikmin 4 did something similar where you could point and click, and that's kind of essentially what you're doing here. So the player controlling Pauline, quote unquote controlling Pauline, she's still just riding on DK's back, but you can point and click with the mouse to send shock waves from her music to attack enemies and blow stuff up. But I don't know, it's not the same as having a split screen co-op or a 2-player co-op where both players are on the same screen. Interestingly, though, this game, it does support game share, so you'll be able to play it locally or online with somebody else, even if they don't have the game, and do 2-player. But the weird thing about it is you can also share it to Switch 1, someone who has a Switch 1, even though this is a Switch 2 exclusive game. So that's very weird and interesting to me. I guess because it's not natively running on the console, I guess you're just streaming it. So this like Switch game share thing, I guess it's not. It's kind of harkens back to what Nintendo used to do with like DS download play back on the DS, which is cool to see, where you could share games and play together if somebody else didn't own it. But in that case, I guess it would actually like download a portion of the game temporarily onto the other person's system, like from the host. But in this one, I guess it's just streaming. So I guess it doesn't matter how graphically intensive the game is; it can just be streamed to the Switch One. So that's interesting. I wonder if they would ever do that for like why doesn't Mario Kart World have that? Or some other game. Maybe they will roll that out eventually in an update, which would be really interesting to see. And maybe that could be kind of a way of marketing for Nintendo to get people who already have a Switch One to upgrade. Because then if they play this game with their buddy by streaming it, and that's the only way they can play, it's like, oh, I want to actually like own that game and have it for myself. Then um, but but yeah, this game I wrote down looks like Odyssey on steroids. Again, I wasn't the biggest fan of Odyssey, but I really feel like this game is resolving a lot of those criticisms and is maybe shaping up to be what I would have liked Odyssey to have been. The collectibles and everything that you get and everything that you do feels like it's maybe going to be more meaningful here. Um, and even though I initially had those concerns, I really don't feel anymore like the rock formation stuff is going to be game breaking. Being able to terraform, like it looks fun, and I've completely warmed up to that. So I still have some reservations, but on the whole, I think this game looks very solid. I'm looking forward to it, and I guess it shouldn't come as a big surprise that this is the next game that the Nintendo EAD devs or whatever the division is that did Mario Odyssey, that this was their next project, because it really seems like they've wanted to do this for a while. Because I mean, if you think about it, I've not really heard anybody bring this up, but obviously, people have brought up that Pauline, she was in Mario Odyssey and played a big role, and there was Donkey Kong references with like the Jump Up Superstar song, and you've got like the little 8-bit, thing where Donkey Kong's throwing the barrels. But something else beyond that, people haven't really mentioned, but like, remember all the street names in New Donk City? You had like, Cranky Avenue and like, Ramby Street and like Squawks Boulevard and whatever, and Dixie Street and all that stuff. So yeah, it feels like even back then Nintendo was maybe kind of hinting like, yeah, we got big plans for Donkey Kong. It's taken them a while for that to come to fruition, but now we're seeing it, and I think it looks really good, and I'm excited for the future of Donkey Kong beyond just this game. Um, Probably, I would say that we're going to get a substantial update to Mario Kart World at some point that adds more Donkey Kong costumes, because he only has like one alternate costume, and Pauline I don't think has very many. Maybe they'll add like the young Pauline as a character, and then hopefully, especially, maybe we can get like Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, and Funky Kong back in there, and maybe a whole new like Donkey Kong Island jungle map to explore with tracks based on like they could bring back DK Mountain and DK Summit and a bunch of those other ones, and maybe one or two new Donkey Kong tracks in there. Who knows? But I hope we get that. I'd love to see that. Because as it is, I just feel like again that game's really not worth $80. But now if they pad it out with some DLC as the time progresses, which I'm sure they probably will, that'll definitely help soften the blow. Especially if I don't have to pay extra for that, where I'm a NSO plus expansion pass subscriber. But yeah, it does make you wonder. Like, so is that the only game that the Mario Odyssey dev team has been working on the past 8 years? Because I know there was like a news story people were sharing about how Kit and Krista were kind of speculating that maybe we shouldn't expect a new 3D Mario game for a while. Because Nintendo is a relatively small company. They've been trying to staff up. Like in recent years, they've been hiring a bunch of extra employees, and they've like purchased and I think are in the process of building like a whole new like building for their headquarters. So they're really going to be, once that gets completed, then they're going to have way more hands on deck. But as of now, Nintendo has always been kind of a smaller development company that can only really tackle so many projects at a time. Um, but 8 years is a very long development cycle. Granted, the Mario Kart World devs talked like they've been working on Mario Kart World for that long, but they were kind of multitasking because they did also do the Booster Course Pass, which was essentially a game in and of itself with like 48 new tracks and a whole bunch of new characters for Mario Kart 8. So it may be that they've put 8 years of development time into this game, but maybe we're also simultaneously developing a Mario game because Nintendo always works on new Mario games. Once one comes out, they pretty much immediately start working on ideas for the next one. So I really hope that within the next year we see another 3D Mario, and if Donkey Kong coming back means that we won't be getting one for a very long time, I am honestly pretty disappointed about that. But we'll just have to wait and see. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad Donkey Kong's getting a new game. But I don't know. I'll be glad when Nintendo does get fully staffed up to the point where it doesn't matter so much, where one game existing doesn't negate the possibility of another game coming out, in the next year or two. So, but yeah, all things considered, I think the game looks really, really great. This is probably my most anticipated Switch 2 game, I guess. I am really looking forward to that Splatoon game, though. I did that video talking about it after it was announced, just a single-player Splatoon spin-off game, talking about how I was really excited about that. But Donkey Kong's maybe surpassed it now, but those are two games I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I think that's going to be a wrap for this video, guys. So thank you all so very much for watching, for listening. If you enjoyed this, please consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate that. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Bye bye.